So what comes out of you when the pressure goes up? I know my answer to that. As financial advisors, we spend years learning technical skills and processes and products and planning and, even technology and all of that and how to give better advice. But often the thing that shapes trust most is not only what we know. And we've spoken about this quite a bit on the show recently, as well as in a lot of sessions that I've been having or presenting, but it's actually how we respond when a client is anxious, when a team member disappoints us, when a meeting becomes tense, or when life outside the office follows us into the room. There's lots going on in the world today. And today we are speaking about the advisor under pressure. It's about emotion, behavior, and trust.
Welcome to PROpulsion, the weekly show for financial planners and advisors who want to build better, more successful businesses. I'm your host, Francois du Toit, and every week we dive into the practical strategies that matter, from growing your client base and improving your services to developing yourself and your team. Whether you're running your own practice or you're part of a larger firm, you are guaranteed to find actionable insights to help your business thrive. So with that, welcome, and let's get into today's episode.
So Chris Fischer is a counsellor and lifelong advocate for personal growth and change. His work focuses on helping people understand themselves better, something we can all do more of, take responsibility for how they show up and build stronger relationships through greater self-awareness. Chris brings a grounded and human approach to this work, shaped by training, life experience, and also his own personal journey. And today we'll speak about emotion, we're going to speak about behavior, trust, and what happens when advisors and leaders, clients, and families come under pressure. So Chris, warm welcome to PROpulsion Live.
Morning. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. You are officially the guest with the best sound we've ever had.
Thank you.
Excuse me. And then I go in a cough. I want to get straight into it, Chris. So thank you very much for joining us this morning and for us to have this. This is going to be probably a vulnerable kind of conversation as well. And, when we start talking about ourselves and things like that, it's really... It takes guts, I would say. Sometimes we avoid a lot of the things that we need to talk about, and hopefully we can touch on some things that will really hit home for a lot of people today. But when we look at business and leadership and family and client relationships, what do you see people getting wrong, particularly when it comes to self-awareness?
Great question, Francois. The thing when it comes to self-awareness is that it really boils down to the way we've been raised, the way society has shown us what awareness actually is. If we look back at our childhood, our life as a whole, we look at what other people do, right? So we look at, if, for example, you're running a podcast, we go and look at what other people do in their podcasts, right? So when we look at what other people do in their podcasts, we don't actually look at what we're doing and what we could change, what we could do better. We always look at the external. So when it comes to the awareness, whether it's business, relationships, financial planning, whatever it is, the awareness actually boils down to what it is we're doing internally. And if we could start there, then we have the ability to change everything around us.
So, is it a conscious decision that we need to make? So I am now going to I want to pay attention because I think awareness for me comes to paying, like it's almost similar. It maybe starts with paying attention, but paying attention to myself and what I do and how I do it, etc. Because I think, if there's one thing that sometimes gets to me, and I've also said this to myself before quite a few times, like when this work is, this is how I am, this is who I am. I think often we also sometimes hide behind that. because like it's an easier answer. Like don't give me grief. Like this is who I am. Take it or leave it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we need to start paying attention, right? I mean, how do I go from okay, this is what I'm doing, and it's not as and it's not always a bad thing. Like I just want to say that as well before I get to the actual question. It's like it's not necessarily that self-awareness that now it's because there's something wrong. It could also be self-aware because like I'm great at something and I need to double down on this kind of stuff. But how do I start paying attention to become more self-aware?
It really boils down to understanding who we are. So I've got an acronym that I've come up with, and it's called REB, and it stands for root, existence, belief, behavior, right? So if we can understand, because as you say, I'm just someone like this, right? So if you say, I come across as a very grumpy person, so therefore I'm just like that. But no, why are you like that? It's just the acceptance of you like that. And like you said, a lot of people hide behind that. And what's the point in that? Whereas if we can go back to the root, so if you go back to your root, it's not about why you are specifically like that, but it's where you developed that choice to be like that. And that's what the root is. So I'll give you an example. If we look at a child grows up in with a highly critical parent, right? That child then develops the sense that they're inadequate. And that's their existence, right? So their entire world, they believe that they're inadequate, that they can't do enough. So they then believe they're not good enough. So when they then become an adult, guess what? They then are perfectionists, fear of failure, people pleasers. And if you think what you do in your life today, it all stems back to your belief. So if you've grown up in an environment where you felt like you weren't good enough, that presents in what you're doing today. Now the question here is probably going to be, okay, so that's the environment that I grew up in, or that's the environment that I am in, and that's my belief, then that's just my belief. And there's nothing you can do about it. But the work that I teach is that there actually is, that you can do something about it. And basically, if we can take that belief system that we've got and acknowledge it and recognize that that is actually what we believe in, that's our belief system, we then get the ability to change that. So, Francois, you asked earlier if it's just a choice of becoming more aware. It is a choice of becoming more aware. It's a choice of understanding what your belief system is and choosing that your belief system doesn't determine what the outcome is.
So I've got a follow-up question on this. Now, if we talk about beliefs, people feel quite strongly about their beliefs usually because they have certain evidence that their beliefs are true. And if I have to re-examine my beliefs, that's not an easy thing to do because, if you get kind of, first of all, to just listen to something that does not agree with your beliefs, I think makes you so uncomfortable. You get really anxious and you just try and avoid it. But also if that what you're looking at is so compelling that it shows that, oh, maybe you are not so correct in your current belief and that maybe you should change that belief. Now you need to say, well, I was wrong all this time. Now I always think about this like two people standing across from a 6 and the one stands on the other end says it's a 9. The one on the other end says it's a 6 and they're both fighting about this thing. And that's always the picture that comes to mind. But how do we practically start looking at our own belief system and saying, well, and again, I don't want to sound like it's that I'm saying like, oh, there's always a problem with your belief system, because it will either say, oh, maybe I need to adapt some of these things, or maybe, you know what, you can keep believing what you're believing and it can still do that. So just that's first part of my question. Let's just first deal with that. Like, how do I start re-examining that belief system practically?
So it comes down to, and the 6 and the 9 is a perfect example, because it's just perspective, right? That's all it actually is. And the stuff that I talk about is exactly that. It's purely perspective. I'm not saying whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. And I like the 6 and the 9, because the person that sees it as a 6, they are determined that they are right. And the person that sees it as a 9, they're also determined that they're right. So neither party is right nor wrong. What it boils down to is that if we can take the responsibility to look at it from a different perspective, it just opens the possibility that there could be a different perspective and there could be a different belief. And you're 100% right. It's so difficult to say to people, maybe your belief system was wrong. That's not the starting point. The starting point is not to say your belief system is wrong. Your belief system is what your belief system is. So if you believe that you're inadequate, there's no point in trying to change that you believe that you're inadequate. You believe it. But it's understanding that you have that belief system that you're inadequate. So when you walk into a meeting and you feel like that you're inadequate, or that you're not educated enough, for example, to be sitting in that meeting, you know that belief system has kicked in. So if you're aware of the fact that belief system has kicked in, then you get the opportunity to say, well, hang on, I can look at this from a different perspective and say that belief system, that I'm not educated enough to be in this business meeting, I don't need to believe in that. I can change that. I can change my mind around what it is that is actually happening here. So an example that I can think of is, as financial advisors, a new product comes onto the market. You as a financial advisor, you need to go and understand what the product is before you can sell it to your client, right? So you need to understand exactly all the details of that product and whether it works or it doesn't work. Then you need to sell it to the client. And in order to sell it to the client, you need to believe in that product. And if you don't believe in that product, you're not going to sell it. If you do believe in that product, you are going to sell it, irrespective whether you think that the product is right or wrong, or if it's the best thing specifically for that client. If it's a good product, you're going to sell the product, right?
Yeah. We could have an episode just on this whole belief system thing. I want to step off of this, but I do have one more question just quickly. Is it possible, though, to change my behavior without changing what I believe? Can I behave differently than what I'm behaving now without changing what I believe?
That's a very difficult one. And because we grow up, right? We grow up in a world where that behavior is not acceptable and that you need to change your behavior. I think it's almost impossible to change your behavior if you don't look at the belief, because the belief is something that's essentially subconscious, right? It's just there. It has been your entire life. So if you think of, let's reframe this behavior, or rather the belief. The belief is actually just a habit. That's all it is. So if you can change your habit, you can change your behavior. I don't think it's possible for you to change your behavior if you don't change your habit. If you're a smoker, you're a smoker. Every morning you get up and you have a cup of coffee and you go outside and you have a smoke with your cup of coffee. Now that's your behavior. How are you going to change that? You have to change the habit, which is the belief, in order to change the behavior. So it's not necessarily changing your belief system. It's being aware of what your belief system is. And if you're aware of what your belief system is, then you can change your behavior.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. So let's talk a little bit about, because obviously, I mean, like somebody mentioned, or I was in a session yesterday or the day before where someone was just mentioning what some of the what some advisors in their businesses have put in place to help their teams cope with, because I mean, you work with people and you build great relationships, and then people pass away, and or things happen in that family, and those emotional things do get to you over time, because I mean, you carry all of that, right? Because you're there for them. You're probably one of the first calls that they make after something goes wrong. But I mean, we are people before we are professionals, right? So we also have emotions and all of that, and we often talk about trust and empathy and relationships, but how much of that starts also just with our own emotional state as a person before I'm even Francois, the professional guy in the office?
Great question, Francois, because you see, before you can take on anybody else's stuff or work with anybody else's stuff, you need to understand what your stuff is, right? So yes, you are human. You are going to make mistakes. You do have emotions. But if I'm a client of yours and you're my financial advisor, how can I trust you if you don't even trust yourself? So it has to start with you trusting yourself first. And I know you love this point or this topic. It starts with responsibility, because we need to take responsibility for ourselves before we can take responsibility for anybody else, right? So if you think of, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm sure we've got a lot of listeners here that are parents. If you're a parent, your responsibility is to look after your kids, to make sure that they're fed, they've got a roof over their head, whatever it is, right? But if you don't have a roof over your head, if you're not fed, if you're not looked after first, how can you look after your kids? It has to start with you. So if you want your clients to trust you and you want your clients to understand who you are or believe in who you are, you need to believe in who you are. You need to believe in yourself, essentially. So if you're selling a product, or if I phone you, something major has happened, and I phone you as my financial advisor, and I'm looking to confide in you, or my emotions have gone through the roof, and you're completely disconnected from who you are, I'm not going to feel connected to you. So for every single person listening to this, you want your clients to trust who you are, you need to trust you first. I had a perfect example of this yesterday. I had a session with a client, a one-on-one session, and he's looking for work at the moment. And he's been applying for jobs almost everywhere, and it's become quite dire. And so he's literally applying for jobs anywhere and everywhere. And he says that he walks into a company and he hands in his CV, and he walked into a medical practice, and they said, "What medical experience do you have?" He's like, "None, but I'm quite willing to learn." And he never got the job. And he says, this keeps happening over and over again. So I asked him the simple question. I said to him, do you believe or do you trust yourself that you are willing to learn? And he said, no. So I said, well, then why would anybody else? So it's almost a frequency, right? In that, and Sam mentioned it earlier with the AI stuff, it's not about history repeating itself. It's about a frequency. So if you have a frequency of that you don't believe in yourself, the person that you're speaking to is not going to believe you either.
It's, yes, when these things are like, this is really where it's at. Like, and it's like, anyway, let me not go down too deep of a rabbit hole for now. We've got lots to talk about. So what tends to happen as well? We talk a lot about what we believe about ourselves and all of that, because then, I mean, there's obviously impacts about how we show up. But if we bring stuff that's happening elsewhere in our life, in our personal lives and our relationships and so forth, when we bring that into a team meeting or a client meeting, or even a family conversation and things like that. So let's say I've got some stress and pressure at work. Now I have to have this important conversation at home, or I have this important client meeting, but I've got all this stuff going on at home, for example. Now I bring that stuff with me because I think it's very hard to separate these things, really. I mean, they're part of us. So what does that look like when, or what tends to happen when we do that?
So it's a very good question because, as you said, we are human and we need to understand that we're human. And if I'm talking to a client and I'm not in a good state, I can openly say that to my client. If I'm having a really bad day, I'm just trying to think of an example that I can give you here. But let's say I'm having a bad day and I go into a one-on-one session with a client. This is the kicker. It's the responsibility of saying to the client, I'm actually not having a good day. Let's see how this meeting goes. Let's actually see what's going to turn up here. Because if you're not having a good day, how can you try and pretend, right? And when you pretend, you're not being honest, you're not being truthful. So if I'm going to have a meeting with you and I've got a lot that's going on my mind, I might behave differently, I might react differently, I might say things differently than to what I normally do. But if I walk into the meeting and I sit down with you and I say to you, Francois, you know what, I had a really crap morning, X, Y, and Z happened, the kids got to school late, I then screamed and shouted at somebody or whatever the case might have been, I lost my cool and it's because I'm actually having some issues at home. Now you understand what my state of being is. And in that way, I've connected with you as a human being, right? Because I am human. I'm no better than you are. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We've all got our flaws. So now you're already starting to trust me. But what I've done is I've taken responsibility of what my state of being is in that moment. And having responsibility, it gives me the power to change things. It gives me the power to be human versus accountability. Because what we often do is we get the two confused. We talk about responsibility and we talk about accountability. And we then, and I know you want to get into this too, we then often talk about blame, or we often blame other people. So I walk into a meeting and I say, oh yeah, I'm in such a bad mood because, so-and-so cut me off. And then because of that, the kids were late for school. And because the kids were late for school, I was late for this meeting and now I'm pissed off and it's all that guy's fault. Okay. And where does that leave us? It almost leaves us with a mouthful of teeth, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. Like I always, like my wife and I have this conversation often, and I go like, ultimately, the buck stops with me. I either did something or I didn't do something. I choose how I react to things. I choose because there was a time where I really got upset when somebody didn't stop with all four wheels at the stop street, right? Because like everybody just sort of stops and then just drives over the stop street because everybody does it. And then I'm the guy who stops at the stop street because ultimately it's like I have control over what I do. I can't control what somebody else does or doesn't do. And I can believe, because that's the other problem, is that one of my beliefs is that, people just don't care about the rules anymore, that they are irresponsible. They are, and that's also not good for my internal, like the way that I behave when I see these things happening. And I mean, it's proof, like, look at that, he didn't stop, So it's simple stuff like that. And I also found that really changed my whole demeanor and my whole behavior. So I often, like when we drive, like I just go like, I just don't even react. I don't care. It's about what I do. So I think also, by managing those kinds of things and how we react, because it started with like, why am I reacting this way? Well, it's because I think, those people are irresponsible. But what has that got to do with me? So that, and you start separating sort of those things from each other. And then suddenly, it also has an impact on my demeanor and the way that I show up and the way that I behave myself in the car, if you will. So I think a lot of that applies to all the things that you've said now.
So I've got a question for you.
Yeah, please.
So if you're saying at that point, right, you feel like that it was about other people taking responsibility or not stopping, right? And it would irritate you all the time. What was going on in your life at the time that you weren't taking responsibility for? Because this is actually the kicker, right? We get pissed off or we blame other people for stuff that they're doing. So you say, yeah, but look at him. He doesn't stop at the stop street, and look at that one, and look at that one, and it annoys you, and it annoys you. What we really need to do is when that starts happening, ask yourself, what were you not doing that was in your life at that time? Maybe you were stopping at the stop street, but maybe you were speeding. And it was actually that was pissing you off. It's not what other people do that piss you off. It's when you cross your own boundaries, that's when you get pissed off.
Yeah, that's a straight shooting question, right? So obviously we'd have to now go back and think about these things, but that, I think there's so much value in that to say, well, why is it such a trigger for you? Probably, why do I get upset about that? And then we can frame it in all sorts of different ways, because we always try and, I think, protect ourselves. And I'm not the bad guy and I'm not this, but sure, if you're really taking responsibility and accountability for everything, then there's no excuses. Like, I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that there is no reason that you can give that why you behaved in a certain way. Like, because we are supposed to be in full control of ourselves, but it's because other things are not well, and we need an outlet probably in some way, shape or form. Or sometimes I think there's so much pressure that, it's like a pressure cooker, like the thing just goes, there you go. Like, and it's just like, okay, now it's getting out and you can't control it, which is sad that one gets to that point. But I think, the more we can sit with ourselves and spend time with ourselves and be brutally honest with ourselves. And I think the other part, Chris, by the way, like, I think one of the most valuable things would be to have a conversation, an open conversation with not only your partner, your spouse, but like your children. Our children are brutally honest, specifically when they're younger. And those kinds of things are like, and to just listen, I think that's the biggest challenge for us. We don't like hearing what the other one is necessarily saying, because we are being confronted with ourselves. And then we often revert to things like, so now it's me, it's always this and always that, like, or I always have bad luck or whatever it may be, like, and we start making those excuses again from that point of view. But I think there's a lot of value by being able to get input from others, from what they are seeing, because they're not so emotionally involved sometimes, from that point of view. And on that point of emotion, by the way, like, is it even possible? Because I think a lot of people want to, like, business is logical. Like, you don't bring emotion into it. You don't bring your emotions. It's a very logical thing. Is it possible to really do that? And is the good thing to do that, to take out the emotion out of business and just make it all about logic?
I don't think it is possible to take emotion out of business. If I look at all the clients that I've worked with and the businesses, listen, I work for myself now, but I haven't always worked for myself. How is it even possible to separate emotion from business? I don't think it's possible. And even if you look at somebody, you might think, oh, they don't get emotional about their business. But you don't see what happens behind closed doors, right? You don't see the businessman sitting at home with his wife that evening, crying his eyes out because, he's battling to pay salaries at the end of the month. That's an emotion, right? So, and I think that if we try harder to remove our emotions, we become colder, we become less trustworthy. Because, you see, for me, It's our emotions that bring through our belief systems. So if we go with the emotion can show us what the belief system is. And as we discussed earlier, if we can recognize and acknowledge what the belief system is, we then can change the outcome, because that's where the root is, right? So, but if you shut out the emotions all the time, you're going to shut out your existence, you're going to shut out the root, you're going to shut out your belief system. And in that way, your behavior is not going to change. So you want to do things differently in your business. And I'm not saying by any means, I'm not saying that everybody needs to walk into the office on Monday morning crying their eyes out, or, letting all these emotions just run wild. No. But you need to be in touch with your emotions. And every single human being on this planet has emotions. Everybody.
Yeah.
Including men, especially men. Men are just, especially men are just experts at hiding it. Right?
So on this thing about, like, we were talking about taking responsibility and the blame stuff and all of that we were talking about earlier. How, because I think, taking responsibility is not about, in my view, like, it's not about, blame me then. Like, that's not taking responsibility. It doesn't mean that you become the scapegoat for other people. Like, that's definitely not what we mean with that. So what is it? How do we take responsibility without taking the blame for everything? Because I think often in a business setup, it'll go, you protect your team. So you go like, I'm sorry, guys, like, no, this is my fault. This is it. And then, behind closed doors, you tell guys, don't let this happen again, kind of thing. So that's sort of what you're taught to do, and to praise in public and reprimand in private, kind of thing. But how does this show up differently in different parts of business specific? I want to talk about business specifically, or even in life as well, probably. Just how do I take responsibility without saying, no, I'll take the blame.
So we need to look at, first of all, we need to look at the blame, right? So what is blame? Blame is purely just giving the accountability onto somebody else, whereas responsibility is not accountability. This is where we get it so wrong, that we talk about this word responsibility, but for a lot of us, we don't actually understand what that means, because responsibility is, first off, if you look at the word, and I say this all the time, it gives you the ability to respond, right? And for all you financial advisors out there, accountability is the account. Who's got the account, right? So it's, when we look at accountability, it's about putting it on to somebody else. So if I'm taking responsibility, it doesn't necessarily mean that I need to take the blame for it, because if I need to take the blame for it, it means then I need to take the accountability for it. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is taking responsibility. So a couple of weeks ago, I woke up late. I had to get the kids to school, and we were running late, and my son got to school late. So I took the responsibility, and I went to the office of the school, and I said to the school, it's my fault that my son is late for school. I overslept. I didn't get the kids in the car quick enough. I didn't, whatever, right? That's taking the responsibility. The accountability part of it is, okay, my son has now missed his first lesson for the day. I will make sure that I sit this afternoon and do that work with him. So there's a difference between the responsibility and accountability. But if we can start with the responsibility, like I said, it gives us the ability to respond, versus blaming. It doesn't give you anything. You're literally just going to sit there with, like I said, with a mouthful of teeth, because, okay, so it's all Francois' fault. So now Francois is going to try and defend himself. There's not much I can say, because I'm just said it's all Francois' fault. And France was going to be like, yeah, okay, I'll take this one, guys. Versus taking the responsibility, rather, it gives you the ability to respond. So if I say, well, who's responsible for this? And Francois stands up and says, it was me. I didn't do what I needed to do on time. Okay, great. And in that way, you also don't have to justify it, because we run around in a world that we need to justify everything. Why were you late for school this morning? Or why were you late for work this morning? Who cares why I was late? I'm late. So if I take that responsibility, it gives me the ability to do something about it. There's a story that I often like to tell with responsibility. When I was in school, I was playing soccer one day with a whole bunch of friends, and we were kicking the ball. And we actually knew we weren't supposed to kick the ball where we were, because there were a lot of glass windows. And I kicked the ball, and I kicked it straight into one of the glass windows, and it shattered the window, and it broke. Now, normally as a little kid, we would kind of run away, and we wouldn't take the accountability or the responsibility, and we would blame it on something, right? But that's not what I did. I turned around and I went straight to the principal's office. I picked the ball up, went straight to the principal's office, and I walked into her office, and I said to her, that window is broken over there because I kicked the ball into the window. And what then happened was, she then asked me, she said, okay, but why did you do that? And it was, well, because we were too lazy to go down to the field and play on the field. So we decided we were just going to kick the ball there for a few minutes. Okay, no problem. So, and the consequence to that was, the next day with the maintenance guys, I landed up fixing the window. But the point here is about the responsibility, right? Versus blame. If we blame, I could have turned around and blamed the wind. I could have blamed that, the field was too far away, that my feet were sore, or my friend kicked the ball, and then we'll end up going into lying, right? And then all that happens is more and more people get into trouble. More and more people follow what you do. So like you said earlier, Francois, nobody stops at the stop street anymore, because we're constantly concerned about the external. We're constantly concerned about everybody else, who's accountable and who we can blame, versus taking responsibility. If everybody, and especially when it comes to the traffic, if everybody could take 1% of responsibility, 1% more responsibility of what they currently do, I guarantee you would have less accidents on the roads.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, we have come to the end. We are out of time. It goes so quick. So just in closing, what would you like people to? There's lots of stuff here that we didn't get to talk about today. But just in general, what is it that you would want the audience, at least one thing to walk away with today, to either go and think about or go reflect on, to go do? What would that be?
For me, that would be, like I mentioned earlier, that root existence, belief, and behavior. If we hear so many times it's about change your behavior, and that's the hard part. But if we can go back to the root and go and figure out what it is that your belief system is, and I'm not saying religion, I'm saying your belief system within you. If you can understand what that is and acknowledge what that is, you get the ability to change that. And with a little bit of responsibility, as we were discussing, you can change your life. You literally can.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much. Please follow him on LinkedIn. Is there any other way that people can learn more about what it is that you do?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, Instagram. Have a look, come look for Tag Institute. We run workshops. I do one-on-ones. Come find us and get in touch with us, and then we can have some fun.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Chris, thank you so much for your time and for being here today. I look forward to meeting you in person at some point and to have some more conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Francois. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. All right. So that's it for another episode. Thank you very much. That was episode 14. My guests next week is Johan Vosloo and Arnold Hatting. Comspace and Clydash have done some fantastic work together. And there's some things that I want to talk to them about. And so come and join us to see when tech's starting to really talk to each other. And, that's one of the biggest challenges, that things don't integrate well. Right? Here's something that integrates quite well and that talks well and that uses a lot of new technology to help make your life easier. So come and listen to us next week. But on that note, we'll be back next week. Same time, same place. Thank you for joining us today. Until next week then, stay safe, be blessed and prosper. Stay curious and love it. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on Propulsion. If you found value in today's episode, then there's plenty more where this came from. You can find all our previous episodes right here on the podcast as well as on our YouTube channel. And talking about the YouTube channel, we go live every single Friday at 8 a.m. until 9 a.m. and we host many different guests, and we also talk about very interesting topics. And on the live show, there's also some incredible segments hosted by some of the most well-known and influential financial planning professionals. So you are most welcome to join us every single Friday. Put it in your diary and we will see you there. And on that note, also please do check out propulsion.co.za/community for all of the goodness and learn more about how you can become part of our amazing community and how that would benefit you, your business and your career. So on that note, stay curious and keep raising the bar.